Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team, no matter the challenge that you face. I'm one of your hosts, Jocelyn Freeman, and you'll actually be listening to myself and a good friend of ours and colleague, Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Now, if you've been a listener, you know that we don't bring on guests very often at all, and that's because we're very discerning about who we allow to kind of speak into your world. But she is someone that I thoroughly, and we both do, trust her wisdom and her knowledge. Because here's the thing, even though we're hitting on a topic that can bring up some emotion for people, which is the mental load, she is going to talk to you about this in a way that unites you rather than divides you. So we'll be going into how the mental load is hurting your marriage, attraction, and intimate life. She's got the research on this, and her book, which is coming out within a week of this episode dropping, is called A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. And she can talk about this topic not only because she is a wife of over a decade, well over a decade, has 2 kids, she has a PhD in psychology, and has an immense amount of research behind this topic around the mental load and how it affects a marriage from both a male and female perspective. So this episode and the book is going to give you a lot of insight into how both partners feel about this topic and being a great team, what you both want in a marriage to really feel that sense of unity. And again, it impacts not just your connection, not just your feeling of teamwork, but being attracted to each other and really having a great intimate life. So there's going to be a lot that we cover in here. Make sure that as you're listening to this episode with Dr. Morgan Cutlip, that you go ahead and read her book. I've read it and I can really stand behind it, that it is so valuable and going to open up some great conversations for you too. So let's go ahead and dive into this conversation. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and sharing about this really important topic.
Thank you for having me. I'm just glad to be here.
I know. Well, I really appreciate, I was sharing with you this book. It shares so many nuances. And one thing I love about your content, even on social media, but it's also portrayed in this book, is you aren't trying to villainize one person. And because this topic around the mental load and roles and who does what, it can be very divisive online, right? Like even some content creators like being very upset about this topic. But what is so important, and we stand behind, and I know you do as well, being in a really long-term marriage, is we want to be united. We want to use this book and these topics to be a better team, not point the finger, not say you're crappy, right? So I want to acknowledge you for really trying to unite couples with this book.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a difference between clicks and engagement and actually what it takes for real lasting change in relationships. And I mean it's something I feel like there are very few hills I'll die on, but this is the hill I'll die on, which is that when it comes to the mental load, and really any relationship issue, let's be honest, you know this.
Mm-hmm.
If we go into it spicy and hot and angry and critical, we are not going to likely get to a place of lasting and meaningful change. Criticism is like the worst starting point for change. And so, yeah, I try to write it in a way that wouldn't upset people because I know there is a real tangible frustration and anger around this topic within couples. But it's so important that we reposition the mental load as the shared enemy in any relationship because it's true. Modern family life is relentless. There is more to do than we have time. And so if we position it as the enemy, we can have a better foundation to stepping toward change.
I love that you said that it's the shared enemy. And what you just said, we also agree, is that there's a lot of pressure on the average couple. Maybe speak a little bit more to that and just kind of empathizing with the couples who What when we talk to couples, they're both working really hard. We're not talking to couples where they're like, "Yeah, I sit on my butt the whole weekend." It's like, no, they both work really hard, whether they both have careers or they both are really putting in all the effort for their family, for the kids. And so just maybe speak a little bit more to the amount of pressure and load that's on a marriage as a whole.
Yeah, I think I have a segment in the book where I kind of like list out what the real enemies are. So it's like the real enemy is the pressure to always be productive. The real enemy is the high cost of living in our society and how much it takes to support a family. It's hustle culture, it's the distraction of our devices that are regularly pulling us out of the present. It's the intensity with which we are parenting these days. We are trying to raise emotionally intelligent children. Do you realize how much more work that is that goes into parenting? That alone increases the mental load exponentially. So it's all of these things that are the shared enemy. It's funny, I was laying in bed last night cracking up. I was talking to Chad. I spent on Saturday 3.5 hours folding laundry and I deep cleaned the kitchen for over an hour. I got in bed that night and I had a pile of new laundry that needed folded on my laundry room floor, and the kitchen was a disaster. And the thing is like it's not as if my husband Chad was sitting around; he was doing stuff all day too, and it was the perfect example of just like the mental load is filled with all of these tasks that there's just like no end to them, and there's so much of it that for couples who are even working together it's never really done, even if you're both
Mhm.
hustling. It's the
Mhm.
game is kind of rigged, and so we have to start to depersonalize it, instead sort of come together and figure out, okay, this is ruthless. How are we going to work together to just do the best we can with all of the stuff that's on our plates?
So before we get into like some more specific nuances around the mental load and ultimately being able to using your term, right, like it share, like really
Yeah.
feel that they're sharing the responsibility as a couple. I think it'd be good for people to hear from you as not like, "Oh, we've just always had it figured out in our marriage." And so you share a lot of this on your social media, but maybe sharing just like the short story of where you didn't always have this figured out, how long you've been married, and yeah, ultimately like some of the aspect of how you got to this place of being able to write a book from an authentic place on this topic.
Yeah, so we've been married 16 years. We've known each other for a very, very long time, though, because we met when I was 14. I'm not going to say how old I am, but we reconnected eventually on MySpace. So that kind of frames it a little bit. But we have a pretty extensive history together. And I think that's always an interesting dynamic to add to a relationship. But, I think the mental load started to develop in a way that was disproportionate, probably from the beginning of our married life together. But I didn't really feel it until our daughter Effie was born. She's 11 now, and I feel like my entry into parenthood hit me in two drastic ways. One, I write about my first book, which is that I could not believe how sort of caught off guard I was by the massive amount of change after becoming a mom, that loss of freedom, that just feeling of like, I don't even know who I am. I'm so anxious, just all of these changes. But the second place that took a major hit was my relationship with Chad. And I think the easiest way for me to kind of capture it is to say it felt like my life changed and his kind of stayed the same.
Mm.
And we had all these unique circumstances around what happened when our daughter was born. He ended up moving to California. I was in Florida for about 8 months till we reconnected. So that shifted things in a big way. But I was so caught off guard by how quickly I developed resentment toward him. I
Mm.
felt regularly irritated by him. I remember just like kind of muttering under my breath these like things that I didn't understand why I was the only one taken care of. And I morphed into somebody I never really wanted to be, which was like this stress tornado. I'm a pretty like relaxed person who's pretty easy and fun to be around. And so to become something else, I resented the fact that I was overwhelmed all the time. And then I resented who I had become. And so that was really the signal that something needed to shift. And part of that is the work I had to do on myself. to get comfortable speaking up for what I needed and to sort of push through some of these kind of tension points in conversations. And the second piece was we had to shift our dynamic, and it took work and it took time. And it wasn't like, I feel like I always say this, I'm not married to a therapist. I am married to a guy who works in construction. I'm married to a dude. Like the things that I share about, the practical tools are things I learned through kind of taking a bit what I know about psychology and theory and technique, but then also in my own relationship. And so it took work, but we are in such a good place that we could unpack this, but I cannot tell you how life changing it is to feel like you have a partner who is alongside you in this process.
And I love that triumph. And I love that you mentioned how it takes work and it takes time. And just for all of us to remember, marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take some time to really figure out how do we do life together. Oh, and then plot twist, life changes, you have a kid. Oh, plot twist, something else happens in life. And so it's an ongoing journey. And I want all of you listening to remember this, that even for people like her and I that do this work, there's no destination where your marriage is perfect.
Yeah.
There really is. So would you attest to that? That you're
Yes.
not like perfect all the time. You still like are like, wait, you didn't cover that?
Yes. And I think like that's one of the takeaways I talk about early on in the book that I wish people would just kind of absorb, which is this idea that life is regularly throwing new challenges our way, just normal life. I mean, things come up, a kid gets sick or one of you gets sick and it's like all of a sudden the load of everything shifts. And so if we can get on board with the idea that life is regularly throwing our relationship out of whack, it's going to pull us apart, the busyness pulls us apart, therefore we're always going to be working on it. Like that doesn't mean that something's dramatically wrong. It's just a normal part of being in relationships. And so many couples, I think, almost want to like think that the relationship is sort of like intuitive. Like it'll just, it's meant to be, it's meant to be. It is what it is. Kind of like these very passive approaches to relationships. But my husband and I are always turning the dials. We're always coming back together, making adjustments, connecting in new ways, tweaking out what's working and what's not working. And I think that's just part of being in a healthy relationship that you um, will help you weather the lifetime together. It's a long time together. And so normalizing that it's going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of effort is so important for
Mm.
couples to have a connected relationship.
A question came to me that a listener might say is, okay, I'm totally wanting what you're describing, that lack of resentment, feeling more unity, understanding we're going to hit road bumps and we're going to get frustrated, but we're still on the same team. So with the mental load, which for anyone who that is new, right, it's the invisible to-do list in your head. That's like one of the simple definitions. You break it down and then of course you describe it in depth. But what is the goal then? Is it about that it should be fair?
Mhm.
What are we trying to really achieve to then feel as though there isn't that imbalance?
Yeah, I think, in the social media content that's after clicks or firing you up, they'll talk a lot about equity or equality. And I think in an ideal world, that'd be awesome. Like, let's just both do half, but that's not really realistic. And so I say that the goal should be whatever feels fair. And I want to acknowledge fair is a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
Fair from moment to moment actually can shift, day to day can shift, which is why it comes back to this idea that couples have to get good at regularly touching base to make sure things feel fair. But when there's a feeling of unfairness, that's when resentment will start to take root. And so that's where couples really need to focus. And at the end of the day, you sort of want each partner to carry a comparable burden. So
Mm.
it's like it's gonna look different. Like example, my husband travels every week for work. And so sometimes I'm carrying a lot more, but when he gets home, he jumps in, we make some adjustments, and then it shifts. And so couples need, you know, they need a flexible approach that really works for the varying demands of their family life.
I love that you said varying demands too, because what that really tells us is that we can't just think we've got it handled. That what you just said, we need to touch base because this week is going to feel really different than next week or last week. And so, just I think one of the mistakes is really being like, this is my role and I'm sticking to it. And this is what I do and this is what you do. And of course, you'll find those things that, you find a rhythm. But Aaron and I, to your point, regularly check in
Mhm.
on, okay, hey, a trip's coming up. What do you have handled versus what do I have handled?
Yep.
Or our daughter's birthday, in a sense, like I've told him, hey, I kind of like owning that, so I'm gonna take care of that, but it really helps me if you just think about these other factors around that weekend. And so just setting each other up for success is so much better than, you should know, right? If a person who cared, they would just know. Now, I do want to add, and then I'm going to share a little context from Aaron and I, because our listeners know Aaron.
Mhm.
They probably wonder about his perspective on this topic, being a male. But I'm going to tell you what the question is going to be so you can think about it. So I wonder how much of this around the mental load and how women might feel around it versus how men feel is based on personality
Mhm.
versus conditioning
Mhm.
and their upbringing versus like societal expectations and roles, right?
Mhm.
Because I think in your book, I know you hit on a lot of that. So you can think on that. The context is with Aaron, I think about his upbringing because his parents' dynamic, they've been together 5 decades now, very much the traditional roles. We've spent extensive time with them, weeks in Ohio, watching their dynamic. So this isn't just like one off instances that I've seen. It is very much, she is go, 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 taking care of this, taking care of that. She has lists. And he, he does kind of like rely on her to do that, right? I don't see him jump up and do that, but it works for them. I can tell she's not upset about it. She never makes remarks about it. She doesn't even seem dissatisfied because that's, in a sense, what they both expect. And that's the role in the dynamic, but that's also the time, right? They're the generation that they're in. I say all that because one might think that because that's what he witnessed, Aaron, that he would operate similarly, but he doesn't. And
Mhm.
so this is why I'm like, oh, how much of this is personality? Because thankfully he's somewhat OCD. He admits that. And so he will notice even things I don't notice. And
Mhm.
you talk about that in your book, right? That what one thing men will say is like, I'm a good doer, but I'm not a good seer.
Mhm.
He thankfully kind of has that in tune, sometimes to a degree where he'll tell me things too much where I'm like, hey man, can you let me relax a little? Because he can almost see even more than I do. But again, like some of that being personality. And so I'm really interested because this weekend I was feeling under the weather and I was reading your book too. So it was like perfect timing. And because I told him, hey, I just want you to know I'm at literally like 30%,
Mhm.
but I knew we still, I wanted to still show up with Sky. Like I wasn't to the point where I needed to be in bed all day. I just was like lethargic and tired. We wanted to go to this Renaissance festival. And so I was like, just so you know, like that's where I'm at. And he's like, I'm on it. So
Mhm.
he packs all these things up and he is even thinking about the energy while we're at this place. He's like touching my back. Like I
Mhm.
even tear up a little bit thinking about it because he's so had this like, I got you perspective and vice versa. And because I was reading this book, I said to him, I said, I really am grateful that you don't always expect it to be 50-50. And he's like, well, yeah, I know that sometimes I'm going to pull 80% and sometimes you'll pull 80%. And so that's my long spiel to then really hear you share some of the points in your book about how much of it is conditioning versus personality and all those
Mhm.
things.
I don't know for sure, like to say for sure, this is how it breaks down and how we get to this place. But I think it's almost like the intersection of multiple things, which is why it's important to say that there are individual differences in how people exist, how we live out our upbringing, in our personality. So I remember you're taking me way back to grad
Okay.
school here, but like I remember learning at the time at least, like the biggest personality theory was the big five. And one of the big five is conscientiousness. And so, there's going to be individual, I think we learned about this in individual differences class, which is like there are individual differences in people's level of conscientiousness and neuroticism, right? If you're really neurotic, that's like kind of hard to be around actually. And like a middle of the line neurotic, you're like, well, you kind of notice a lot of stuff. So I'm grateful.
Mhm.
So, there's all these individual differences with personality that I think come into play. And then I think also these things interact with one another. So, our growing up experiences are going to interact with our personality and who we are, and that's going to manifest in different ways. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. I talk about in the book even our socialization. And I have to, like I say in the beginning of the book, that, I have to generalize a little bit. I try to get into the nuance of stuff, but I have to generalize a little bit. And generally, women are socialized to self sacrifice for the preservation of our relationships, which means that we tend to prioritize things a little bit differently by and large. Also, we're judged by others and by society for how well we do this. I was joking with my son like last week. He was going to an event at school at night and it was cold and it was raining. And I was like, wear a coat. No. I'm like, and I honestly don't care that. I mean, I'm in Southern California. It's not that cold. But I was like, come on, man, just put a coat on, just take it at least. And really, this was about me. It wasn't even about him. I knew he'd be fine. He's like, I don't want to, I'll lose it, blah, blah, blah. I was like, fine. I go, but you know what, buddy? When you roll up without a coat, everybody around you is going to be like, why didn't his mom make him wear a coat?
Mm.
Nobody's thinking, why didn't his dad? There's just sort of these defaults that we go to in society that shape us, even when we're not fully aware of it. And, I think men, on the other hand, broad strokes, are socialized to provide and protect financial security and physical safety. And so they are judged in these ways. And so all of this stuff is just like, it just melds together. There's others too that shape the way we show up in our relationships, how we sort of end up soaking up some of the responsibilities, one partner over another, what we are notice, what we're aware of. And, in the book, I say the game is kind of rigged when we do broad strokes for one partner, usually the woman, to take on a lot more of the responsibilities early on and when you have kids, and also much faster, which kind of sets us up to carry a disproportionate amount. But my point, and really in the book explaining a lot of these things, is to depersonalize how we get to a point of it being inequitable and being heavier for one partner. Now, it feels very personal because it stinks to carry the bulk of it or to feel like you're alone in this. But when we can understand how we get there and how there are all these individual differences, it can help to sort of depersonalize and kind of take the power out of some of this stuff and just help you have a better understanding to enter into these conversations. Okay, it's not that you don't care about me, it's that you got a little bit of a personality difference. You're wired a bit differently. You're socialized a bit differently. You come from an upbringing where it was really traditional and you've taken that template and you've put it on our relationship, but that doesn't work for us. So we have to come together and we need to figure out and negotiate a way forward that works for us in our family.
Mm. I'm really loving that piece around depersonalization and, in a sense, like just coming with more curiosity, right? So if I'm the female and I'm feeling this in my relationship, I want to come with that energy.
Mm-hmm.
What are the defenses that men need to lay down to be receptive to this conversation?
This is such a loaded question. So I think some of the big things that show up for men is one thing is they're often judged in society by how they perform, not necessarily who they are. I actually think it's kind of tricky to be a man because masculinity is sort of vague. And so they're oftentimes when you come to them and suggest maybe you're not doing a good enough job or I need something to change, it will feel like a criticism against their performance, against how well they're doing making you happy and providing and protecting a life of security and safety for you. And so a lot of times I think it shows up as statements like, I guess I'm just the worst partner. I guess I can never get it right. I'm never doing enough for you. I try, but it's not. It's sort of like they spin it back. They shift the blame, and what ends up happening. So I give these things names in my book that I kind of just make up, but it fits to what I see in my research and things like that. But one I call the deficit default, which is
Mm.
basically like this default to a place of like you're just not enough as a partner. And the problem with this is that it ends up shifting the energy of the relationship to reassuring the partner that is actually whether they mean to or not, causing their partner pain and hurt. And so it sort of sucks the life out of the conversation. And then couples get into this dance, which you guys talk about it all the time too, which is then, okay, well, she can either get louder or she can shove it down. And both of those usually result in disconnection and more distance in the relationship. So this defensiveness piece really becomes a major hurdle for couples to get to a place of finding fairness.
And I would hope that both partners are listening to this episode just in case the female is the first one to listen, right? But she's going to send it to her partner. She's like, hey, I found this great episode. But okay, she's the first one. And she's like, yes, I do feel as though I'm met with that defense of I'm just not enough, right? Or here we go again, like I'm failing you.
Mhm.
What is a way they can keep the conversation from spiraling and moving forward? And, again, like just staying curious, like I want to get beyond this defense so we can actually get somewhere. What would you say?
Yeah, I have a whole section in my book that talks about resistant partners and gives like tons of techniques and scripts because I think this is really one of the main sticking points for a lot of couples. So one piece is to just slow the conversation down and reflecting back to them what like sort of this misunderstanding. So if they were saying something like, I guess I'm just never enough, I can't get it right, you would say, okay, let's stop for a sec. What is it that you are hearing me say? Because that's not at all what I'm trying to communicate with you or to you. So, what are you hearing me say? And what that does is it lets the couple in the moment revise things so it's more easily received and understood correctly by both partners. And I think, too, a lot of times these sort of relationship conversations go off the rails really quickly because people just then respond to that defensiveness, push a little harder, and then it ups the defensiveness. And then they're like way in the weeds in this argument. And they're like, what are we even talking about? I don't know how we got here. So when you slow it down and you sort of, I call it like fact checking in the moment. What are you hearing me say? Let me revise that. That's not what I mean. It really can help stay on track and keep the tone of the conversation a little bit softer, more agreeable, like you're both really, again, on the same team, trying to move forward through this conversation to get to the other side to feel better in your relationship.
I love that. Okay, so then let's imagine the other partner is listening to this. And so he's like, okay, yeah, she asked me that question. We stay curious. He's like, I'm going to let down that defense of it being about my performance or failing. What is something he could say or ask to move the conversation forward to uncover more of like what he could shift or do differently?
Yes. So I think so to shift it or if he feels defensive.
I think so. He's noticing the defensiveness and he's like,
Okay.
okay, I'm not going to just say that by default because we have to remember, listeners, right? What do we tell you all the time? Sometimes you have to just notice that thought and be like, okay, I'm not going to say that. I've said it 1,000 times. I already know where that conversation goes. Let me say something different now. So, what's that something different they could say rather than that quick defense that keeps
Yes.
the conversation open and helps them understand, okay, how could I be a better partner? If it's not about me failing, if it's not about my performance, how can I keep the conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, one is to just call it out. And I do think we need to be better like commentators almost in our own arguments around these things so that we can slow it down and like go play by play. So one thing is just call out, "Hey, I'm starting to feel the defensiveness. I'm really working hard not to respond in that way." And it's almost the flip of what I said before. Can you say that another way or this is what I'm hearing, is this right? I've done this with my husband before. I'm like, this is what I'm gathering from your words, like, is this what you want me to take from it or can you revise? So that's one thing. Another is you can just ask for something you might need in the moment. So I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable, which is more accurate usually than defensive, and can you just give me a little bit of reassurance that we're okay so I can try to calm myself down and make it to the next place in this conversation. So I think some of those things, again, slowing it down, calling it out, allowing opportunity for revision instead of jumping to conclusions or assuming things will always help your conversation go better. I think another thing that the defensive partner can do to buy themselves time is you kind of just restate what you heard in your own words, and it can sort of help you move through digesting what you were told. Okay, I'm hearing you. This is what I'm hearing. I'm going to say it back to you. You tell me if I need to correct anything. And that can also help to kind of ground you in the moment. I think, too, defensive partners ask for a break if you need it. I
Mm-hmm.
remember reading a study about how men have like a major increase in their heart rate a lot of times during difficult discussions. By and large, women can kind of sit in there in that emotion a little bit longer. And so, again, we need to depersonalize this and know this might come up. So, if your partner needs a minute, give them a minute and set a time to return to the conversation so you can finish it. Don't leave it hanging out there, but finish it. And in terms of being a better partner, there's like a lot of places you could go with this question. But I think one thing you can say is, what is the first thing I can do to start to help this feel better for you in our relationship? Is it that you need me to appreciate you more? Do you need me to take something on? If it is, like, let's set a time to talk about how we're going to redistribute who does what. But really, just being open and willing to step into change is going to feel so good to that partner who brought things up in the first place.
I love that question. And then I think too, even looking at your book, right? This whole section around sharing is caring.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, we are sharing the load. And so what are we sharing? You've got share perspective, share expectations, share ownership, and share accountability. And there's a lot in here, you guys. So you have to read the book to really get all of this insight. But let's say she's like, well, I don't want to have to tell you what to do, right? So he asked that question you just said. And she's like, I don't want to have to tell you what to do. Then where do they take it from there? Is it one of these sharing perspective? Is it sharing expectations? Is it sharing owner? Like, because I mean, I love this right around expectations, ownership, accountability, because
Mm-hmm.
that goes again to like Aaron and I don't just expect each other to read our minds. Like, if yesterday when I wasn't feeling well, I was internally like, I just hope he steps up to the plate and like, he should just know I'm not feeling good because he should pick up on my tone and my facial expressions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, my motto in marriage is I want to set him up for success.
Yes.
And so I share that. And we do that with everything. We talk about trips ahead of time. Like I said, we talk about birthday parties, we talk about visiting family. That is our formula. And so maybe talk about some of these points in the book around, all right, we want to get past these defensive walls. We want to get past just I don't want to have to tell you what to do. What does it mean to share expectations, ownership, and accountability?
Yeah, because a lot of women will say that I shouldn't have to tell you what to do. And so, I mean, this is a really tough question because there's so much that kind of leads into sort of demystifying that mindset and dispelling it. And so, one is that we have to really understand that we enter into a partnership and then into parenthood with a whole slew, for example, of expectations that live inside of us that don't really come out until we are parents or until we are married. And so, a lot of this stuff is just like, it's silent. It's silent judgments that we hold, against ourselves and against our partners. And if we never put them on the table, again, like you say, set your partner up for success. I say something very, very similar. I 100% believe that. We have to give them an opportunity to get it right. And so they're not going to know all of your family upbringing and all your expectations unless you have these conversations. I share in the book this example of me having an expectation that Chad should have taken the lead on sports. And I don't know where that came from. I mean, my mom kind of took the lead on our sports. I'm very sporty. Like, I played a lot of sports. I don't know where that came from, but I remember getting really angry inside when
Mm.
he wasn't stepping up until I was like, oh my gosh, like, why do I have this expectation? I've never expressed it. We're fighting about something that's not really related. We're kind of down in the weeds. So I had to walk it back. I had to own this and I had to speak it out, put it on the table, and then we could negotiate. And so there's lots of touch points in relationships like this where if we keep things inside of us, we are not even giving our partner a chance to get it right. And so we do have to have these conversations. I think Another one, I think what was your example when we started this question? It was like, I just want you to do more
Mm-hmm.
around.
Or just, and I don't want to have to tell
I don't
you.
want to tell you. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna like jump ahead, way ahead in the book, but I talk about initiative taking. So I surveyed over 535 women for this book on the mental load, and then I interviewed both men and women. And the top thing women want when it comes to the mental load from their partners is more initiative taking.
Yep.
Now, that's really vague. Let's be honest. What the heck does that mean? And I think a lot of requests around the mental load are often kind of vague. I want you to just see it. I want you to jump in and help. I want you to do more. Like, what does that actually mean? And so I believe number one, we have to be really clear with our desired outcomes when we're expressing a need, not just express the need, but what is the actual deliverable of that need, which is really important. However, partners need to really step into initiative taking. I realize it's vague. I realize that might be really daunting. So in the book, I give something. So I'm doing this in case any men listen who are the non-default partners. This is your like marching order. I give a formula for initiative taking, and I do this with our kids too. And what that is it's basically knowing plus action. So you can't step into initiative taking if you don't know where things are, if you don't know what's on the family schedule, if you don't know what people's preferences are.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about something called the Buffett formula, which is just around the accumulation of knowledge. And I challenge the non default partners every day. Oh, the Buffett formula. I didn't say what it was. The Buffett formula is going to bed every day knowing more than when you woke up.
I love that.
So every day, learn one new thing about your significant other, learn one new thing about your kids if you have them, and learn one new thing about how your home and family life functions. The more in the know you are, and that's having some accountability for how you show up in your relationship, the more in the know you are, the more you can step into action with confidence that you're like doing it the right way
Mm-hmm.
and that you're doing it in a way that really moves the family forward. So I challenge the non default partners to really take some ownership over that piece. So for the default partner, she's going to have to spell it out sometimes. She's going to have to express what she needs. She's going to have to be clear. And the non default partner, you're going to have to step toward more initiative taking and the gathering and accumulation of knowledge if you're going to actually translate that stuff into action.
I love that. And again, like her book has so many frameworks and strategies without being overwhelming because these topics can feel emotional or somewhat like endless. And she gives you, hey, I want you, partner, to think about this and do this. And here's a step. And the other partner. So you really do have to see everything in this book. What I love about what you said about initiative is also something we notice, and it affects attraction.
Mhm.
The other element of why your book is so genius is because you loop in how this impacts your sex life,
Mhm.
your intimacy, your connection. An initiative is, I'm speaking from a female perspective, it's sexy,
It
especially
is.
the longer that you're married, right?
Mhm.
And I even think about, so another thing we were doing before I wasn't feeling well was we were booking some things for our 10-year wedding anniversary trip this weekend. So we did some research. Number one, he brought up the conversation, hey,
Mhm.
let's talk about our anniversary trip. And we've talked about it, a few times before, but he's like, hey, this weekend, let's talk about it. Let's really get some things done from it. Then, we did some research because we're making it like a cool big trip.
Awesome.
Everyone, we'll post about it when we get there. It's in September. But once we made a couple decisions, he's like, I got it. I booked this. I booked that. I booked this. And I see you like with your
So
eyes.
hot. It's
It was
hot.
hot. It was
Yes.
hot
Yes.
because it just felt like he got it, and we want that. And I'm not saying men don't feel that as well, for sure. I can only speak from the female perspective, but it's like, you got me. And you know what it shows me? You want that time with me. It
Yes.
matters to you.
Yes.
So, talk a little bit more about why maybe initiative is sexy, but also just even the broader theme in your book around how this impacts a couple's sex life and connection.
Oh my gosh. So, oh, this is why the book is like longer than it was supposed to be, but it's not too long.
It's
Chapters
not
are
too long.
short,
It's so easy to read, you guys.
easy to read.
She's funny. She's so funny in this book too.
Okay, so I'll answer one piece of that and then I'll come back to the intimacy piece. So I talk in the book, I have this in under the share perspective. I share three things that men want, three things that women want. And one of the things that women want is to be pursued. And what you're describing is that Aaron was pursuing you. You felt like he desired time and togetherness with you. And I think as we're together longer in a relationship, this sort of like falls to the wayside. And women step into this place a lot of times of managing the relationship. Oh, we need a date. Oh, we should talk about this. Oh, we should. And it feels like, why am I alone in caring for a relationship? Why am I the only one that seems to care about it? So, this idea of being pursued, even when you've been married a long time, becomes incredibly important for women to feel really loved and secure in their relationship. And all of that leads to a more feeling of desire and warmth and intimacy in a relationship. So just pointed that out. Well done, Erin. You're crushing it.
And by the way, you guys, he doesn't get everything right. I don't want to paint this picture of like, oh, well, Jocelyn just has this perfect part. No, there are things he admittedly does not get right, and so I really don't want people to read it this way. I'm just sharing a couple examples of where he is.
Yeah, we all shine in our different areas.
Mm-hmm.
So Chad's planning our summer trip right now, and I'm like, oh, it feels so good to like
Yeah.
not worry about it and to have him take the lead on that. So it's such a gift. So okay, it affects our desire. The high mental load and a feeling of unfairness affects our desire in a few ways. So one is that a defining feature of the mental load is it occupies cognitive capacity. So it takes up space in our brains. So that crowds out room for peace, presence, patience, managing our emotions, and getting in the mood for sex, especially for women to get in the mood. It's almost like our brains need to be turned off for us to be
Mm-hmm.
turned on. So the fuller our heads are, the harder it is going to be for us to find this sort of sexy state of mind. So that's one way. Another way is that when the mental load feels really unfair, we are inevitably going to start to develop probably a bad attitude toward our partners, some resentment. And none of this is conducive to getting in the mood for sex. Sex is vulnerable. Sex requires a feeling of security and safety. So if we can't access that because we're frustrated or we feel like our partner's not there for us, then it's going to be hard to find our desire. I always joke, I say this because I feel like this is actually a lot more common and nobody talks about it, but I tend to bring up really big conversations right before sex. It's like a running joke because, well, Chad, I don't remember if I shared this, but he travels almost every week. So there's like gaps a lot of times in our connection because we're both busy and he's on a different time zone. And so he'll come back and he'll, want to have sex. And I'll be like, oh, did I tell you? And then I enter into this long conversation. And he used to get a little bit frustrated. And now he understands that this is me getting to a place of feeling connected to him so I can
Mm.
enter into intimacy with him because it's vulnerable and I need that connection first. So when you don't feel connected in your relationship, it's going to be hard to get in the mood. The third one is that a lot of times, not always, a lot of times an unfair mental load will result in a parent-child dynamic.
Mhm.
So the the woman usually will come to her partner and she'll talk about her full mental load and it will be met with defensiveness, dismissiveness, this sort of hardship Olympics. We're competing over who has it worse. And what often will happen is she'll sort of up the ante. She'll get a little bit louder. So she becomes the nagging mother. He becomes another child in her eyes. And it's not just her toward him where it affects
Mhm.
desire. Like this can work negatively in both direction.
Mhm.
Finds a nagging mother sexy, who finds a partner who feels like another child sexy. And so this dynamic is very detrimental to a couple's sex life.
I mean, really, for those of you hearing that, it is like, okay, we both contribute to wanting intimacy. We both contribute to wanting to connect. We influence each other, and we have to remember that. That's why it doesn't make sense to point the finger and blame just one person because it's such a dynamic, it's such a dance. And so, again, you have to read this book because we're scratching the surface. I mean, there are so many nuances and perspectives that when both of you read this, you will get in each other's world. Sometimes we forget to do that. We forget to step outside of our shoes, think about things from their perspective, how they see it, knowing they're a totally different person than you. So they're not going to experience it the same way. And so this book is going to help you do that. It's going to help you see things from their perspective, get curious, and get strategies. Like she has a ton of strategies to unify you. Again, this is a book you both want to read because she's not going to divide you. She's not going to make just one of you have righteous anger and then the other person's like being thrown this book, like, you have to read this is why and it's like, no, hey babe, like let's understand each other's perspectives in this. And ultimately when we got married, no matter what our vows were, we're making a pact to be a team and to build a life together. And that life takes a lot of work and there's a lot on our plates, but let's do it as a team because it's going to keep us connected. It's going to have us have more, your subtitle, How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. So this isn't just an isolated topic, the mental load. This is impacting every area of your relationship. So there's a lot more for people to get from reading this book. Anything that you just want to say in closing this out for someone who's listening, whether it's the female, the male, just like a little motivational pep talk moment?
Yeah, I love that you said it's the mental load impacts every part of the relationship, because that's a piece I really wanted to flush out through the book, which is that it's not just divvying things up differently, it's that how this issue, if not resolved, will really erode the relationship. So thank you for saying that. I think the last thing I like to sort of like squeak in here is that I had a secret agenda when I was writing the book,
Mm.
is that I wanted to write a book that men would enjoy reading. And my secret agenda part of it is that I wanted to do some of the heavy lifting for women,
Mm.
because a lot of times we're the ones sort of trying to convey this information to our partners. We're trying to get the buy-in, we're trying to shift the relationship. And I know that it's probably going to remain like that. But I wanted a book that would not stir up defensiveness, that would help both halves of the couple feel very seen and understood, and then also equip them with really tangible ways to move forward. And it's been fun because I sent the book out early to different male readers, and to see that feedback coming in where they're saying, oh my gosh, I have all these new insights, I started implementing changes, I felt more intentional about how I'm showing up with my family. I sent it to one of our friends, and they've been in couples counseling, they're just like the couple who's like does it to take care of their relationship. They're
Yeah,
like
yeah,
so on it,
yeah,
and they've been doing that for 10 years, and they talk about the mental load all the time. And he's like, I have this whole new layer of understanding even with all that work we've put in.
yeah.
And so it's just been offering me as the author just a lot of hope of like, yes, I'm so glad this is hitting with men. And I just want your listeners to hear that your partner can receive this information. And I don't think it's going to stir up defensiveness, but it will also offer a lot of insights that can shift your relationship in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, I acknowledge you for having the courage to write this book because it can be a controversial topic, as we mentioned, right? There can be a lot of heated emotions, and some of that makes sense, right? Especially if it has been really unfair and you only get met with defensiveness. That's really frustrating. And so I encourage you to send this episode, have your partner hear that, hey, this is a book that could unify us. Read it together. Think of this as a map to being a better team.
Mhm.
So I just applaud you for writing this book. It is so brilliant. You covered so much in here. I like laughed. You're funny. You're relatable. It's not dry. So really great job. And
Thank you.
again, just acknowledge you for having the courage. So thank you for being on the show, everybody. We're going to link the book in the show notes. It's called A Better Share. I mentioned the subtitle. Her book is coming out, you guys, within a week that you're hearing this episode. It would mean so much to me personally, because I'm her friend, if you go and get this book, because number one, you're going to read it anyway. It's so good. We've been telling you how good it is, but it also helps the book launch, and I want my friend to succeed. So it would mean so much to me personally and to her if you order it the week of her book launch or even right before as you're hearing this episode.
Thank you. So
Yes.
grateful to know you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you
Oh,
for
cool.
having me.
Yes, thank you for having. We're gonna have all your links in the show notes, and everybody go check her out, her book, her Instagram, and all the goodies. All right, Morgan, we'll talk to you next time.